Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome everyone. So thank you, Dr. Seguno, so much for that wonderful introduction. So like she said, my name is Whitney Nichols. I am a second year at the Quinnipiac School of Medicine, at the Frank H. Netter School of Medicine in Connecticut. Today we'll be talking about the study cycle, and so really just giving you the formula to really help you succeed on your exams. So next slide, please. Okay, great. So we just did the welcome and the expectations. The next point that we're going to work on is we're going to talk about an introduction to the study cycle and what it is. We'll talk about the 5 sections of the cycle. We'll give you some resources to help you really implement aspects of the study cycle after this call, and then we'll have a Q&A where you can ask us any questions, and then kind of open up a form if you want to know anything cool about what we do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, great. So what is the study cycle? So it's a 5-step approach that helps students really become more efficient learners. And so what this does, it helps you take large amounts of information to chunk it into manageable pieces. And so if you think of something really, really large and you break it into small pieces, that's how your brain really works best. And so as you take these little small pieces, you're able to work them and to put them back together, take them apart again. And so it really helps you actively learn information. So this study cycle really came, it was adapted from someone named Frank Christ, and his system was adapted by Dr. Sandra McGuire in her book, Teach Yourself How to Learn. And so Dr. McGuire is at LSU, and she's a professional at the Center for Academic Success there. So next slide, please. So great. So the study cycle, this study method, really is just a guide for you to have effective studying in your everyday life, so that you don't really have to cram information for a big test that you have coming up, for a big project that you have coming up. It kind of helps you break this big thing that you have to do into smaller chunks of time with smaller chunks of information. And I want to pause and say that there are really no shortcuts doing this, right? So you have to take each and every one of the steps that we give you and do them in order to make sure that you're really, really benefiting from this. And so you want to make sure that you do this each step throughout your entire semester or throughout your entire quarter, and so that you can really become a more effective a more effective studier, or a learner is the right word, each and every day. Okay, so we have this word here called metacognition. So what is it? And let's break this word down. So the definition of metacognition is the understanding of one's own thought process, right? So this idea of, as you're thinking about how you're going to tackle something, that's this process, right? So you may not even know it, but before you tackle a problem, you think to yourself, what are the steps that you need to take in order to solve that problem? And so that awareness of you thinking about how to take those steps, that's what metacognition is. And so we talked a little bit about Dr. McGuire from LSU. And so she really is an expert on this. And she talks about this idea that learning must occur for there to be evidence of learning, right? So of course you have to learn in order to have evidence of learning. But what does that really mean? It means this active process of learning. So not just reading over information, kind of just letting it wash over you, but actually reading the information, putting it and applying it to information that you already may have in your brain, writing down any questions or thinking about questions that you may have about the information, and kind of actively working with it. And so metacognition just increases your learning. And so as you're thinking about what you're thinking about, you're really just kind of playing it over in your head over and over and over again. And so that's this idea of active learning compared to passive learning, when you're kind of just letting the information wash over you, or kind of just reading something for the first time and just letting the information just kind of come into your brain. So next slide, please. Okay, awesome. So step one. So step one is your preview. So this is something that's really, really important. It can really make a big difference in helping you become organized and be ready for class. So what you want to do is you want to take any textbook that you have or any other study material, and you want to make sure that you spend enough time to review it before class, not during class. Why is this important? Because it helps you develop a big picture of the information that you're walking into, right? And so you want to make sure that if there are any vocabulary words, if there are any bold words or headings, any objectives in the chapter, that you're kind of familiar with those already, and you kind of have information about what your lecture is going to talk about. And so your brain works as a big file cabinet. And so for those of you who don't know what a file cabinet is, it's a where you have drawers, and you have normally it's organized in a manner so that when you put something somewhere, you know where to come back and grab it and retrieve it. And so that's how your brain works. You have a place where you put in, so that way when your brain knows, hey, we're getting more information here, we're going to file it here. So when you need to recall it, or you need to use it on a test, or when you're talking to someone, your brain knows exactly where it is. And then also another step that you want to take is that you want to prepare some questions for class, and that can be very helpful because, again, one, as you're previewing, you're trying to gain some information, but also preparing questions for class can help you stay focused in class. And so that's extremely important, which leads us to our next step. So next slide, please. Okay, great. So step 2, attend class. This is extremely important. And you don't just want to attend class, right? You want to actively attend class. So it's not enough just to have your body there. It's not enough to have your notebook open, or not enough to have your laptop open. We want you to actively listen to what your professor or what your teacher is saying. You want to take meaningful notes. Meaningful notes aren't writing down every single thing that the person says, because then the task is more so writing everything that they said versus taking in the information. So you want to hear what they've told you. You want to take that information and write it in a way that it makes sense to you, so that when you go back and you do the other steps, you can really pull that information in a place that it makes sense for you. So if their words aren't working for you, put it in your own words, apply it to concepts, again, that you already know. Asking questions. So hopefully you either can ask the lecturer questions or ask yourself questions. Okay, in medicine, a lot of times we're going to get tested on things that aren't like the others. And so if your professor says, this is how the normal trends work, but there's an exception, that's a good thing for you to ask yourself a question for. And so when you go back to that information as you're studying it, you can say, okay, I remember an exception. Oh, right, this is an exception, so that when you see it on the test, you can think, oh, you can't trick me. I already know what the exception to this is, and I already know which one of these is not like the other. And then lastly, one of the most important things here, you want to stay off your phone or your smart devices, right? Not only is it rude to your lecturer or your teacher, it kind of wastes the time that you have there, right? And so if you have an hour for class, but you're on Facebook, or you're texting your friends, or you're kind of daydreaming, you just wasted an hour that you're going to have to go back and learn that information. And so if you hadn't had an opportunity to look at our time management, Miss Alicia Garnett went through this idea of how you want to take advantage of all the time that you use. And so if you spend an hour of class time doing things that you don't need to do, you're going to end up spending 2 hours to do something that you could have done in 1 hour. And so there's nothing that is that important that's going on, except for maybe if you have an emergency or something like that, that you would need to stay on your smartphone or device. And so that can certainly wait. You can reward yourself after class with any of that stuff, but you, again, want to be very focused in class. You want to get down all the information you need, ask questions, and just be active there. And so that'll really help you as you're trying to move information that you kind of had in your preview, and you're kind of trying to work it into working from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, which we'll talk about next. Class to take away that time. And so again, if you're spending an hour in class, you really want to make sure that you get the most that you can out of that hour, because if you're playing on your phone, or you're checking out Instagram, Snapchat, Hollywood, TikTok, whatever you're doing, that's an hour that you wasted and that you're going to have to redo. And so if you use an hour doing something else, and you have to then gain another hour, you wasted 2 hours to do a project or do something that you could have learned in class in 1 hour. So again, if you don't understand what I mean by time management, that I really encourage you to go back and watch that presentation, because it was a wonderful presentation, but it just helps you understand that there are 24 hours in the day, right? And you want to take advantage of all that you can, so that you can do the fun things that you want afterwards, okay? So just stay off your phone, be actively engaged, especially when you're attending class, okay? Okay, great. So now we're gonna have a video that we're gonna watch to hopefully tie those two things together for us.
The study cycle is a 5-step process you can use to improve your studying and become a better learner overall. Maggie uses it for a variety of her college courses. The study cycle goes through the following steps: preview, attend class, review, study, and check in. Before going to class, Maggie previews the material. She skims the chapter looking for any key terms and ideas. This will give her a basic foundation of what's going to be covered so she can get more out of the lecture. Then, Maggie will attend class. This may seem pretty obvious, but there's more to it than just showing up. Maggie makes sure that she's attentive and focused. And because she previewed the material, she knows what to take notes on. After class, Maggie briefly reviews her notes while the material is still fresh in her mind. This isn't a long study session, just a quick recap. It gives her a chance to mentally summarize the main points and explain them to herself. This will help her to identify any gaps she may have or questions to address. Later on, Maggie takes time to actually study the material. She'll spend time reviewing her notes from class as well as any assigned readings. These study sessions don't have to be particularly long. A focused 20 to 30-minute session might be enough. After some study sessions, Maggie will check in with herself. She'll want to ask questions like, are my study methods working? And do I understand this enough to teach it to others? This will help her to assess how effective her studying has been and how well she understands the information. Then she loops back around to the preview step for the next class and the cycle starts over. All of these steps may seem fairly obvious on their own, but the reason the study cycle works is because of how they interact with one another. Each step feeds into both the previous and following steps. For example, during the preview step, Maggie may encounter a term or idea that seems a bit confusing. Then, when she attends class, she knows to focus on this and ask questions if she doesn't fully understand it. Or maybe after studying, Maggie is checking in with herself and realizes that her methods aren't as effective as they could be. This will allow her to both alter her study habits for her next class or topic and could change how and what she previews. It will also help her to realize what material she needs to spend more time with from the previous class. If used regularly, the study cycle can not only prevent procrastination, but also improve your memory and your retention.
So the video went through all 5 steps. So now I'm just going to just hammer a few other points home. So step 3, so as we learned with Maggie, so step 3 is your review. And so your review is you want to do it within 24 hours. It's best if you do it right after class when the information is still fresh. So something that I try to do is I try to write a quick paragraph about what I learned in that class. So what that helps me do is that helps me say, when I go back to studying, I'm remind myself like, okay, Professor so-and-so said this. This is what I'm supposed to get from this class. Great. Now I can kind of jog my memory when I go back to the information. The next thing that you want to do is you want to, as you're actively engaging in the review, you're not necessarily trying to memorize it. You're going to do this a lot later when in the next steps. But the review really just helps you to say, okay, did I space out at some point in the lecture? Why do my notes kind of drift off here? And that may be a great opportunity if you're doing this right after lecture for you to ask the lecturer to get any additional notes from someone else while you're still there, so that you know going into your information later that this is somewhere that you have a knowledge gap. In addition, your memory works. You have short-term memory, and then you also have long-term memory. And so what going to class does is it puts information in your short-term memory. However, if you don't continue to work with it, you don't continue to keep using it, your short-term memory kind of goes away, right? So if you meet a new friend and you don't see that friend in a very long time, you don't think about that friend, you may forget their name, right? I know I do. So for long-term memory, that's the idea of memory of things that you just know. So your address, maybe your mom's birthday or dad's birthday, the name of your dog or your cat. And so those type of things are going to long-term memory. And so you want information that you're going to have on your test and in life to be in your long-term memory, because if you have to retrieve that information or really remember it later, it's a lot easier to do that when it's in your long-term memory versus having to put it in your short-term memory over and over and over again, which happens when you cram. Okay? Okay, great. So now we have another polling question. So how many of you all review your class notes and your coursework within 24 hours of the class? 100% of us don't. So I also, so I'm really bad at this sometimes, right? You get busy, you kind of want to get out of class, you want to hang out with your friends, do lunch, and I definitely understand that. And so that's why the study cycle is so wonderful, because you can spend 15 or so minutes just doing it right after class, in the little break that you have, maybe you're walking to lunch. But if you do this really quickly, it really can make a huge difference later. So I definitely want you all to try it, and just kind of just briefly go through your notes, and I'll tell you why why it's important for our next step. Okay, great. So now step 4, studying. So studying is going to be your intense study session, and we kind of will talk about a little bit about what a study session can look like. But this schedule, you're really just trying to work on the information that you learned, hopefully recently, right? And so you want to set specific and realistic goals. So like I said, if you are working on history class, right, you're not going to read the entire book in a study session. So maybe you want to say like, okay, maybe I'll read this, half a chapter today. Maybe in this study session, I'll really get this down. I'll do some practice problems. And then the next study session I have, maybe I'll do the other half, right? Because again, you don't want to make goals for yourself that you just feel like you can't accomplish. Because it's not going to make you feel any better. And then you're also it's going to leave you more work later on down the line. So you want to be specific and be very realistic. Next, your study tips, right? So, maybe you study best in silence, right? But if you're studying in silence and then your friends are around you chattering, or you're at the lunch table, or maybe someone is blasting music beside you, that really won't help you, right? So if that's where you study best, you want to make sure that you find that place. So it could be location as well. So if maybe you fall asleep when you're sitting on your bed. I know I do. So I have to sit at a desk, and I have to sit on the couch, and I have to have a table in front of me where I'm actually working, and so I'm not too comfortable so I can study well. And then lastly, maybe you need to take opportunities to really work with the information. So this active learning. So maybe you need to quiz yourself, and maybe you need to use practice problems. I know I definitely use practice problems to say, okay, wow, I studied all this information. Now can I recall it in a way in which it'll be applicable for my test? And so you want to take all these things into consideration when you're having an end-to-end study schedule, and you'll set that in your goals. So if you say, I'm going to study this at this time, I'm going to do it for this long, and at the end, I want to have accomplished this. And that way you can check that off, and then you can move forward with the rest of your day. Or if you have to do another study session, you kind of can feel pretty good that you got that crossed off your list. Okay. So here's what a very brief example of what an intensive study plan can look like for you. So again, very beginning, you want a goal set. So what do you want to accomplish? So we talked about history. If you want to accomplish, that half of a chapter, then that's what you're working to accomplish. And as you get better at creating study session plans, you'll know what you can normally get accomplished in a study session. And so as you get better at this, you'll say, hey, maybe a half of a chapter is a little too much for me. Maybe I need to take a little less. And so maybe you need to have a couple more sessions versus just having 2 or 3 to knock out that big chapter. Then you want to study with focus for the next 30 to 50 minutes. So maybe you're organizing your books. Maybe you're organizing your study material. Maybe you're creating flashcards or creating concept mapping, where you're taking all the information that you've learned and trying to put it in a way in which it makes sense. So like this, sometimes I create webs in which I start with, if I'm starting with photosynthesis at the very middle, then I'm reaching out to saying chlorophyll and plants and all these other things that I just happen to remember because I concept map. And then maybe you're also summarizing. So you're saying, okay, I learned a bunch of things here. I'm going to summarize this so that when I go back to it, I have a very neat and organized way of attacking it again if I'm not remembering everything. And so then after you finish your 30 to 50 minutes, take 10 to 15 minutes to reward yourself, right? Take a break. If you want to watch a cute cat video on Facebook, take that time to do that. This is the time where you want to hop on Instagram. However, you want to set a timer, right? You don't want to have studied 30 to 50 minutes and then you're on Instagram for another 50, right? So you kind of blew the study session, or your reward kind of is the same as your focus. So you want to be disciplined there to say, okay, I'm going to take some of the time of my study session to reward myself. And it gives you something to look forward to as you're really focusing on your studying. So I always turn my phone off when I'm studying with the focus. I don't want to make sure that no one calls me and no one interrupts me. And then I answer any calls during when I reward myself. And then lastly, just kind of like the step that we're talking about, you want to review what you did from your study session. So as you're going through concept and information, the most recent things that you did are going to really stick well. And you're going to say, wow, I really did well in that. But you want to go back to the information you started in the very beginning of your 30 or your 50 minutes and say, okay, do I still remember what that was? Okay, great. And so as you review, then you can say, okay, these are the things I studied. Here are the key points I made. And then maybe you may need to come back to that again. But you'll know that once you review and you write down, okay, great, I know this really well. I should be able to get through this faster next time. But maybe I'll spend a little more time at the very beginning to make sure I go over that information again. And so an average study session can be about an hour and 12 minutes, 72 minutes. Just kind of depends on what you're trying to get accomplished, how much time you have. And again, as long as you're disciplined with rewarding yourself, okay? So this is kind of what an intensive study session plan can look like. Okay, great. So we have one more video.
The Center for Academic Success presents the Intense Study Session, a studying strategy that improves efficiency. So how do you begin? Step 1, set a goal. What do you want to accomplish? Do you need to read your textbook, complete homework problems, review notes, gather research, write a paper? Intense study sessions can be anything that needs to be completed. Beginning with a goal will help you stay on task. Step 2, study. With your goal stated, begin doing what you have selected with action and focus. Most students find that 30 to 50 minutes is enough time to accomplish one goal. Make notes as you read, complete a concept map, filling missing information by searching online. Think about what you're learning to be sure the new information makes sense. Step 3, recap. Once you've completed your goal, recap your progress. Recapping is simply writing a short summary or making a note to track your progress. If you have a question or stumped on a concept, you may note that as well. Step 4, take a break. Go for a walk, stretch, get a healthy snack, or whatever will help you relax for 5 to 10 minutes. After your break, begin another intense study session. Concentrating on one subject for 2 to 3 sessions is typically beneficial. However, changing subjects can help you improve retention of information and focus. Implementing intense study sessions will help you keep focus, retain more information, and stay in control of your learning.
So that is really telling you what an efficient study session will look like, right? And so now you can see why cramming isn't necessarily great, right? Because when you cram, you don't necessarily give yourself time to take that break. You're kind of just shoving information in. You're not enjoying learning the information. So that's why this plan is really helpful because it just gives you a better aspect on the content, and it gives you a better kind of view of the topic that you're learning as well. Okay, and so the last step is step 5. So you're assessing. And so right here, you want to evaluate your mastery and understanding of the material. So this is a great time for you to just say, okay, well, what did I really learn during this session? Do you feel like you really gained what your professor was trying to get you to learn, what your teacher was trying to get you to learn? And then it's also a great time for you to say, okay, well, what questions do I still have? So hopefully you've done this with enough time that you can go back and ask your professor or your teacher to say, hey, here's something that I really, as I was going through my study session, here are some things I really wasn't 100% confident on. I'm not sure if I could get this right on an exam. I'm not sure if I can teach it to someone else, right? And so when you think like that and you have enough time, it gives you the expert enough time to help you walk through that material. Again, am I confident with this new material? And I'll add to that, are you confident with adding the new material to information that you already know? And so hopefully you're starting to understand that everything that you learn is like this step. You're climbing up a ladder, or you're taking one step and the next step and the next step. And so each grade that you pass, you're adding on information that you're supposed to learn from a while back. And so hopefully that you're saying, okay, now I understand why this is a bigger picture, or I understand, why I learned this last year and now I am adding to it. And I really want to put this idea of, can you teach it to someone else, and are you testing yourself? So teaching it to someone else is really important because sometimes people will ask you different questions. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a person. Sometimes you may teach your dog, right? But you may be able to come up with questions that you feel like, oh, I don't know if I taught that right, or I thought this was it. Maybe I should refer back to my notes, and maybe this is something that I should go over a little bit more in a study session. Or maybe it's your mom or your dad or somebody who's not in the class with you. And that's the best way because they have never seen the information before, right? And so when you help them understand it, then you really, really know that you've begun to master the material because you took what someone else taught you, you broke it all the way down for you to understand, and now you can break it down in your own words to help someone else understand. And then lastly, self-testing. Self-testing doesn't always have to be practice problems. Again, it could be the questions that you wrote for yourself as you're going through the lectures. It could be just general thought questions that you had, and you're just saying, hey, I wonder how this would work. And so just by having those things and just seeing if the research is out there, maybe Googling it and saying, hey, oh, wow, I thought about this. Someone else thought about this as well. And that just, again, helps you to just keep actively working with the material. So this word of metacognition. Okay. Okay, great. So now the fun part. So now we're really going to be putting together all the information that you learned and now to how to actively apply it. So here's some resources. And so actually, I'd love to hear from you all. If you have any resources that aren't up here that as I'm going through, I'd love for you to drop them in the chat. But here are some three that we use. And so one of these is mind mapping. And so I'll give you an example of what mind mapping looks like on the next slide. But really what it does is it helps you kind of break down all the things that you may have or all the things that you may need to do or everything for one topic, right? And so it may be pretty daunting to learn all of, the 18th century history, right? But if you break down certain wars and certain empires and all these things into digestible pieces, you can keep adding them together. And then when you see a question and you think 1800 history or whatever you're learning, you can remember the little tiny pieces and little information about that. And so you kind of just break things down in your brain and then help yourself recognize it all together. You also can use mind mapping for things in life, right? So maybe you have a big project that's coming up and you kind of need to break pieces of the project down that you need to get accomplished. Mind map can help you do that as well. You can kind of just see it all in one way. So for visual learners. We also talked about last time, we talked about Quizlet. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Quizlet, it's a free resource. And sometimes people have already put Quizlets together for others, and you can kind of just go through and use what other people have. But you also can create your own. And so it's just a way, and if you like to do flashcards and you don't want to buy the index cards, you can do it online. You can download on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and you can kind of go through those as it makes sense for you. And another app that people use is called Anki. I know I use Anki, but I used Quizlet first. So it's really cool. And I really recommend you guys to look at it. The last one we want to put here is a study schedule. So we talked about this idea, exam countdown light. And so what exam countdown light is okay, maybe you have a lot of things coming up or kind of in your brain, right? And so maybe you don't necessarily have a planner, or maybe you have a planner and you just want to know, okay, well, what things do I need to tackle first? And so a great way for you to do this is downloading exam countdown light. And so if you have a project that's coming up in 14 days, right? But you have a paper that's due in 3 days, you know that you need to dedicate your resources to your paper first, and then you want to dedicate some of your resources to your exam. And so it's really helpful if you have a bunch of different classes and a lot of things coming up. It kind of just helps you prioritize what things to knock out first. And so, and it's a visual way. You can put pretty colors. It shows you days. And then it's really nice because when you finish something, you can cross it off your list if you're like me and you want to see things just kind of disappear. So it's really nice, a really nice way for you to do that as well. Okay. Okay, great. And so mind mapping. So I think Dr. Segundo did this. And so we're working on her being able to put something under her vacation, but she kind of just mapped out life, right? So she has her family in one aspect of it. She has school. And so with that, you can add additional pieces to family, right? And so maybe, if you want to add, somebody's birthday's coming up or there's family reunion happening, you can add that under family. For school, maybe you have, you need to pick out classes or you have separate to-do lists for that. maybe for vacation, maybe you have dates for your vacation, or there are places that you want to go and you kind of have that as an offshoot. And then maybe you have different things that you need to do for work. And so you can make this as big as possible, but I would recommend that if you have, but so many, and it's kind of getting a lot of stuff up there, I would recommend for you to get your own, get a separate like box for each of the things that you're working on. That way, when you're going through it, you can kind of quiz yourself. And so I normally use it if I have, a topic, I'll try to break this down for a lecture. And then after I break it down for a lecture that I was given or a class time I was given, then I will try to build one with 2 classes of information, then 3 classes, then an entire week. And then I'm kind of I know where to put each thing in my head. And so it kind of helps because you can see this on multiple devices. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everybody. And then Dr. Seguinro she was kind enough to give us an example of her busy schedule and of why the countdown light really helps her and really works for her. And so as you see here, she had something coming up. She had 10 days until this colon cancer panel. And so with that, she knew that, okay, I need to kind of knock this out before I can really start this breast cancer panel. But also it kind of let her know that, hey, you don't have a lot of days between your colon cancer panel and your breast cancer panel. So you need to start working, on your colon cancer panel a little earlier than maybe you would have wanted to, because you have so many other things coming up. And so it's a good way for you to say, okay, now I know that this week is going to be hectic. Maybe I need to start studying or start writing this paper a little bit earlier, because I know 2 days after this paper, I have a huge exam. And so if I knock the paper out first, because the due date is earlier, then I can spend more time working on my exam, studying for my exam, and to a point where I feel really, really comfortable with that. So I hope that makes sense on how we kind of can use these different, this information to really help you just prioritize all the different things that you have going on. Because I know that you're really busy. I'm just taking full advantage of all the hours that you have each day. Okay. I also impromptu want to point out that I also use an app called Time Block. So I know that many of you have your phones out. So with Time Block, I have to literally write down what I'm going to do every single hour of the day. And so that's something that Miss Garnett talked about in our time management series. I got that from her, and it has made me so much more productive, because I know that every day between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m., I'm going to study whatever I learned for the day. And so I have a little notification that pops up and says, you should be studying. And I know that from 5 to 10, I will sit there, my phone will come off, and I will study. And then at 10 o'clock, I will give myself a break, and then I'll do some other things that probably sleep, but sometimes things that I want to do. And so I want to encourage you that if you sometimes struggle with what to do and what hour or how many hours you should be dedicating to things, if you write everything down, you know how efficient you can be in 2 to 3 hours. You may learn that 4 hours is just too much. And so if you're getting to the point where you're taking 4 hours to do something and you're not getting as much out of it, and you spend 2 hours and you're getting more out of it, you won't know these things unless you're always self-evaluating how well you study. And so it's really important that you take good notes on not just in class, but how you're studying, so that you can figure out the best way for you to do that. Okay. So I have done a lot of talking, and now I want to turn it over to you guys. I want to know, what is something that you've learned today that you can use tomorrow, or even today? What's something that you've learned, and hopefully you've been engaged with this, so that I can then take this and hopefully learn from you as well. So I encourage you to either write it in the chat, or Dr. Seguinro, they can come off of mute, that's okay. So this is your time to talk to us. And don't be shy. I hope I didn't put you guys to sleep. Okay, great. Great.
So one of the responses, Whitney, is using the few minutes before and after class to review.
Absolutely. Allison, yeah, absolutely. It really makes a huge difference, because you don't get lost in the information. I mean, how many of you guys have heard your teacher say a word that you just don't know, and you're really just learning, you're spending the whole time in class just saying, what does that word mean? Right? But if you went through a little bit earlier and kind of looked at some vocab words or either some definitions, you at least have somewhere to kind of work with that information. Okay, awesome. The apps outside of Quizlet. Yes, it's very, very helpful. Very helpful. Mind maps to outline information. Absolutely, Lola. that really, really helped me a tremendous amount. And so if you don't like technology, it doesn't have to necessarily be with technology. I'm in a room where I have I'm surrounded by whiteboards, and sometimes I will literally take out my markers and just whiteboard the entire room, all the information I know, and then I'll go back to my notes and see what information did I miss out on. And it's helpful because I can take a picture of that and do it again next time, and then hopefully add more information and keep building from there. So great. That's awesome. So now that everyone has put that in there, are these things that you're going to start working on today or tomorrow? I know it's a little late, so maybe a little late for information to do now, but I really hope that these are tips that you're going to learn and to use and continue to evaluate yourself. Awesome. So Hannah said clear steps on how to study. Absolutely. Very, very, very helpful. And so that way, again, you guys may learn that that you have one really, really great way of studying, and you can be efficient in that time, and you can do things that you really like to do, and that you don't have to dread studying, right? Because I'm going to come in, I'm going to spend these 2 hours, and then after that, I'm going to go outside and play with my friends. Maybe not with COVID-19, but maybe you like to play video games, or maybe you want to cook in the kitchen or read a book. And so this way you'll have the time to do those things because you'll kind of get the studying out the way, you'll get the information you need, and then now you don't have to cram, right? And so when the test is coming and all your friends are just, very scared about the test, you've been practicing this information for weeks. And so it'll be secondhand nature to you. It's in your long-term memory. The answers will come very easy to you. And if they weren't coming easy to you, you would have had opportunities for you to talk to any experts, like your professors or your teachers, to ask them for help so that they could help you identify any gaps in knowledge that you may have. Okay, awesome. So again, I have done a lot of talking, and I want to hear from you all. Do you have any questions? Did all of this make sense? Do you want to hear any ways in which we actually apply this? Yes. It would have been very helpful for me to know before I got to medical school as well. Absolutely. Never too late though. Now you can apply it to other things. I'm always a good opportunity to really apply this to just about anything. And then as you get better at it, you can then teach kids, and they'll get it. Awesome. I see a hand. Yes.
So I have this Latin teacher who is amazing. She's wonderful and a family friend, but she does this thing, here's an example. I think on Tuesday, she just gave us this Quizlet filled with 78 words, and she's like, here you go, we're having a test on tomorrow. And it's like, surprise, wham, you need to know all these, they're new. How do you deal with that?
That's a good question.
So that's a great question. And, Whitney included, and she'll continue to learn because just like with any topic, medicine is one of those topics that you get, hundreds of words at one time, and then you're asked to know them all and be tested on them. So what I recommend that you do is break it down into sections. So all those 70-something words, were they all on the same topic or different topics?
They were different topics, and
Okay.
I had 2 hours to learn them all.
Right. So what I would first do is break them down into sections. So how many topics were there?
They were just random verbs, nouns, and adjectives.
Okay, so just right there, you just broke them down into nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So you want to take big I know, right? Mind blown. So literally, this is how you would form your mind map, right? So we talked about metacognition, thinking about thinking. So mind mapping, mind mapping, right? Think about it. So in my head, you just told me these 72 topics, right? And I said, what are the 3 different categories, right? Nouns, verbs, adjectives. I'm going to break them down into that section, right? So that already brings it down to less than 72 items. So now each item will probably be 20-something items in each, right? Then within those nouns, adjectives, and verbs, then I say, okay, which ones are more action? Which ones are active? Which ones are passive? Then I might say which ones ones are descriptive, which ones are non-descriptive, right? You start breaking them down into categories. So then in your head, when you're taking your exam, like, okay, think of the verb category, think of the active, think of the passive. You start breaking them that way. So when you have it organized in your head in a certain way, it makes the topic not seem as large. So whenever you get something like that, hopefully that doesn't happen too often, because that's not an easy thing to do on the regular, because you really want those things to translate into your long-term memory and not just your short-term memory. But breaking them down from large topics, large concepts into groups. When you can chunk information together, and that's a real big thing with the study cycle, it helps you take things that are this big and make them small, but put them in different categories that are that big each. And when you can do that, you can tackle it a little bit better. But just you already know it, right? Subconsciously, you just told me, like, well, it was a mix. It was nouns, verbs, adjectives. Those are 3 categories right there. And then you can break them down even further from there.
Okay, thank you. And
You're
also,
welcome.
this is like the study cycle. It kind of seems like geared towards like, I don't know, it seems really difficult for someone who's like neurodivergent, because they don't have like the like the willpower kind of, I don't know, it's a lot of a struggle even just to get started on something like that. So how would you deal with that?
In terms of starting the study cycle for like a class, or do you mean in general?
Just like in general, like how do you, if you're struggling just to like get the initiative to get started on the study cycle, how would you like deal with that?
Okay, so I think, you take a few steps back. I'm just going to go back to our time management webinar where someone asked a similar question in terms of, how do I just get started studying? Sometimes I just don't have the motivation. I just don't want to do it. So I always tell people, and this is just something for life, right, in general, create what your vision board is, right? So you can do it, manually, electronically, whatever you want to do it. You can also check out the doinfluence.com. We have a great lecture in our professional development for how to create vision boards. So I'd say create a vision board for yourself and say to yourself, what do I want to do? What do I want to do in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's what do I want to be, right? So you create kind of a little board for yourself that's also a map for yourself. So that map kind of says, okay, in order to get to become this, I need to do this. In order to become this, I need to do that. Right? So an example for me is my board was, I want to become a surgeon, right? And how do I do that? And I was in, at the time I was in middle school. I know, nerd, right? Geek. It's okay. Geeks and nerds are the best ever, okay? Nothing wrong with us. So I had this map and I said, this is what I want to be when I grow up. So I said, well, first I need to finish high school. So, all right, within that, what do I need to do? Well, I need to take all these math and science classes, right? I need to take chemistry and biology. Okay, then after that, then I said, well, what do I need to do in college? I need to take all these classes. Then I need to do this for medical school and go on and on and on. So with that, every time I would get really kind of like, oh my goodness, I just want to go out and do what my friends are doing and I don't want to do this and I want to do other things, I go back to that vision board and I'm like, all right, that's the goal. I have to keep my eye on the prize and remember the goal. So I know it's hard sometimes to feel that motivation, especially now with everything going on in the world with COVID and, a lot of e-learning, and the school is a lot different than what it is for everyone nowadays. And that's very difficult. And I understand that. I think when you have that vision board and you have something that is your final destination, right? What you want to get to, you always refer back to that and it'll motivate you. What I recommend is you probably have a laptop or a smart device. You can create an electronic version of one and actually put it as the background, of your desktop or something. So for me, I'm always having to look at it, right? Every time you turn on your laptop or look at your phone, you see that goal, right? So it motivates me every single time. So once you can get your motivation by setting your goals and setting your path, then everything else falls in line. So then you're like, okay, now I got to go ahead and learn all these noun, adjectives, and verbs. Even though there were 70-something of them, I'd only have 2 hours to learn them, but I want to get to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and do it now. And one other piece of advice that I have for you is, I always say everything in life is temporary. Right? Even life itself, right? I know, that's actually a positive thing. Don't think of it as a negative thing. So the way I see it is that right now you're having to go through and learn all these 72 terms in less than 2 hours. But guess what? what happens the day after that? Then you're done with that, right? That was just a temporary thing that you had to do. Right now with middle school, high school, college, those things are all temporary. They're not forever, but the effects of them can last a very long time. So I always say, whenever you're lacking that motivation, remind yourself that this is just temporary. This is going to get better. I'm not always going to be a student. I'm not always going to have to be studying. It's going to get better. So I always say in every phase of life for myself, some people use the term, this too shall pass, but the equivalent for me is, this is temporary. I'm just passing through this portion. This is just temporary. So I look through that reward, look through that goal that I want, and know that what I'm doing right now is the temporary thing that I have to do to get to that goal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. While we're waiting for any additional questions, I will go ahead and just let everyone know about our platform, www.thedoinfluence.com. You can find great resources on study tips, on professional development, and really just anything that you desire. You can reach out to us. We have different professions and careers on there, from the actual professionals talking about what they do and how to become someone like them as well. If you have any questions and want to reach out to those professionals, if you're looking for a mentor and you want someone to be able to mentor you, we can get that for you as well. So go ahead and check us out at www.thedoinfluence.com. If there's something there that you think is really important to you and you would like to see, message us and we can make it happen. Next month, we're going to have another educational webinar. It's going to be on November 16th at 4 p.m. It's going to be on writing and editing basics. It's going to be taught by 2 writers. They're going to teach you basically how to do the basics of writings. I think Hannah talked about the pronouns, adjectives, and verbs. There'll be a lot of them next month, and just really how to make sure that your essay writing and the basic things that you need to do well in school are well thought out and easy to manage. We'll have some cool tips in there and some online programs that can definitely help you because it is the 21st century and it's the digital age, so we can definitely use digital help as well. We will have a video recording of this video as well as an ebook for you to be able to refer back to and have active links in there as well. And it looks like we have another question. And the question is, are there any tips for anyone who may have attention deficit disorder? Whitney, do you have any suggestions for this? I could definitely add some after you speak.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is a great question, and I have several friends who are here in medical school with me, and so some of the tips, things that I've seen them do, they always break down the information that they need to tackle in manageable pieces. So they really like to be able to cross things off, and so when they find themselves wandering, they normally just let themselves wander for a little bit, but they always come back. Sorry, my lights went off. And so when they come back, they know where they wandered off because they have a set list of things that they want to do. And so I found that, when I'm studying with them, they'll say like, hey, we need to get this tackled in 15 minutes. They know when it's going to start, they know when it's going to end, and they know exactly what they hope to accomplish in that time. And so because it's very focused and they can cross it off at the end, they find that like this structure, they do really, really well with that. And something that I've even picked up that I think that can help, just has helped me as well, just the additional structure.
Absolutely. So with attention deficit disorder or ADD as well, so ADHD with the hyperactive or without, there are a lot of studies that have been done for students and their learning in regards to some ways to succeed. So one of the ways that is reviewing notes before bed. So reviewing the notes of that day about 10 to 15 minutes before someone wants to go to bed is a really good way to help keep that information fresh and helps you review some of it really while you're sleeping. The way that our brains work is we're starting to go to sleep and we're starting to turn things off, but a lot of our memory function is still very active. So those things you remember the next morning. So reviewing your notes a little bit before bed has been shown to help patients with attention deficit disorder. Another thing is exercising. Exercising, I think, is great for anyone, not just people with attention deficit disorder, but really exercising 4 to 5 days a week has been shown to help because it really helps you focus and sharpens your executive function. So people with attention deficit disorder sometimes, most of the time, have difficulty with focusing and attention. When you exercise for 30 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week, you're having a regimen, you're focusing, and you're also during that time just exercising. So you're being able to exercise your brain that helps you stimulate some of that executive function that you're going to need later to remember the things that you need to do and to focus when you're studying. Another thing that's been found is drinking something a little bit sweet while you're studying. So it's been found for people with ADHD, and I think this helps a lot of patients, I'm referring to people as patients, right? A lot of people as well, is like a sweet drink, so obviously not, like pure sugar, but maybe like a Gatorade or, something, some juice, 100% juice drink. Having the glucose gives fuel for your brain. So especially when you're really tired, now you put in fatigue into someone who already has attention deficit disorder, then it's almost a lose-lose situation. So have something sweet to drink to help give your blood, some of your blood through your brain, the energy that it's going to need to continue to remember and function on those things. So I hope those were a few tips that help. I could always send you a couple articles that can help as well. But those are some tips that actually have been studied and found to help patients with attention deficit disorder. And I keep referring to patients, but people. My term is everyone is a patient, right? So people. All right. Well, thank you all so very much. Are there any other questions that we can answer for you all today? All right. Well, thank you so much for participating. We will be emailing you. Thank you. We will be emailing you the link to the ebook and the video. We usually have it up and ready to go about a week after the webinar. And you will be able to download the ebook and replay the video. And we really hope that this helps. Thank you so much to Ms. Whitney Nichols for really giving us a great presentation today. I think it helps a lot of students. And for me, every time, I review the study cycle, I learn something new myself. And so, we're always learning, so we can always use these tips. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Whitney, so much. And we will call that the end of our presentation today.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.